series. As you know, Avaap is an industry-focused cross-platform management and technology consulting firm. Avaap's market-leading change management practice is powered by ProSci research, data, and concepts. We have a great session ahead with Chad Luxenburg, CEO of Scitrain, the global expert and trusted partner in delivering exceptional leadership development programs, along with Avaap's own Vice President, Dr. Shannan Simms. Before I hand it over to Shannan and Chad, I want to point out that if you have a question, feel free to submit at any time during the webinar, and we will be sure to answer them at the end. And lastly, everyone who registered for today's webinar will receive an email with a link to view the webinar on demand. So feel free to share that with your colleagues and view again if you would like to. All right, let's get started, Shannan and Chad.
Vanessa, thank you so much. So I'm Shannan Simms, and together with Chad Luxenburg, CEO of Scitrain, we are going to be your guide for the next 45 minutes or so. If you've joined our presentations in the past, you know I've been a management consultant for over 20 years, and I've had the opportunity to work with leaders at all levels of the organization to drive new ways of working, whether it's straightforward process or policy change or large scale, highly complex management or merger and acquisition. At the core of these, changes and transformations is really about helping people move from how they do things today to how we're going to do it tomorrow. And every consulting firm, I think, has their own flavor of change management, but they're all pretty much rooted in the same core concepts. What's often missing, based in my experience and in conversations with Chad, what he's seen across across institutions, is that there is often not a focus on change leadership. What is it? Who does it? Where do you put your bets? Where do you put your resources to get the biggest lift? So what we want to share today is maybe a little bit of a different perspective on change leadership, kind of coming at it from a lens of transformational leadership and what that means, and really focusing on building the right behaviors. So our goal is really just to talk about why being deliberate when you're leading the people side of change matters to your organization's success. We want to take maybe a split second just to differentiate between transformational leadership and change leadership. And then we'll spend the majority of our time talking about learning agility and how it is connected and intersected with developing transformational leaders. So next slide. I think why it's really important to be deliberate in leading the people side of change is that organizations don't change. You guys have probably heard me say this. People change. They change one person at a time. And the more disruptive the change in front of you, or the transformation is, or the number of changes that are in front of you, it really has an exponential impact on our people. And I think if 2020 taught us anything, is that we're living in a VUCA 2.0. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. It's a term that is used to kind of describe our modern state of the world. It is rooted in globalization. It's rooted in rapid technology advancement. It's rooted in so many changes around data. Our world is turbulent, and that scale of turbulence, I think, is exponentially greater than past generations. And it feels like the more data we get, the more ambiguous circumstances can appear. And the more technology advancements that we experience, the more complex actions sometimes feel. The more we try to predict the market, the more it's unpredictable and volatile. We're seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning and robot-assisted platforms. They're reshaping how we do work. We are seeing the Internet of Things and big data reshape marketing and consumer engagement, and they continue to drive just a heated debate around privacy. We're predicting 8 billion people in 5 years, of which 80% will have a digital presence, and upwards of 90% will carry a supercomputer in their pocket. Who's doing the work is changing. 3 years ago, I guess 4 years ago, if I can do the math, we started to see Gen Z enter the workforce, and they're going to start to assume managerial roles. Millennials currently comprise the largest percentage of the workforce. And in 5 years, 45% of millennial workers will be of a minority ethnicity. Our generational composition is going to stay at 5 or 6 generations working side by side as boomers and Gen X work longer into traditional retirement years. So our world is becoming more uncertain. It's becoming more complex. Our workforce is becoming more diverse. And as leaders lead, and they lead at all levels of the organization, they're going to need to be more agile to balance both the day job of managing the business while leading ongoing organizational transformation. Often those changes aren't happening one at a time, but they're happening many at a time. So let's start just with a quick level set on leadership. I think there are a number of myths around what leadership is. And so for our purposes today, we're pulling from some research from Tottenham, Hughes, and Ford. The article is aptly called Oxymorons and Myths. So I really appreciated this article, and that some of the preconceived myths or the preconceived ideas that people have as they come into organizations is that somehow leaders aren't employees, that they're outside of that employment structure, or that leadership is a role that is specific and formal and it's based on a title. That somehow during times of change, that these non-manager employees, right, leaders, just embrace it, and that it's leaders embrace the change and non-manager employees resist change, right? Like that somehow there's this delineation that all leaders are on board and, all employees are going to resist the changes that are in front of us. And then a fourth myth is that those non-management employees, right, like folks who are doing the yeoman's work, they have to be, put in quotes, managed by leaders who don't resist change, right? But we know the reality is that it's very different, that leaders are people first, their employees second, and their leaders third, right? And as they navigate through changes that impact them, they're going to react as people first, and they're going to think about their employment second, and then we get to the point where we think about being a leader. Leadership is an activity. Reality number 2, leadership is an activity. It is not just a title, and leadership happens. Number 3, it happens at all levels of the organization. When I was growing up in my former consulting firm, one of the key tenets was you lead from where you are, right? It doesn't matter whether you are the formal team lead, but you're an opinion leader. And every single employee has a leadership responsibility. And so during times of change, reality number 4, leaders have to commit to supporting 2 different activities. One, they have to support the specific change, and the second is they have to commit to helping their people navigate through the change and to navigate that change in a productive manner. But during times of change, ProSci kind of identifies that there are a number of mistakes that leaders and managers can make. And I'm not going to drain this. You guys will get this deck so you can spend some time with this. But some of the key things that are our leaders, right, the sponsors, the individuals who hold the purse strings, they're funding these projects. Some of the biggest mistakes they make is that maybe they showed up at the beginning, but they failed to remain active and visible, or maybe they underestimated or misunderstood what the impact was going to be on the people. Number 3, maybe they failed to communicate about the need for change, or they delegated, number 4, too low into the organization, and the transformation or the change lost momentum. Or number 5, they failed to demonstrate support, right? Walking the walk and talking the talk. Managers, the ProSci has found that managers, some of the mistakes they make are a little different. The first is they just ignore it. They outright just ignore the change, or didn't try to understand it, or they abdicated their responsibility to drive the change. Number 2, maybe they communicated once, or they didn't share the information, or it was inaccurate, or they kind of filtered it through their own bias and opinion on the change in front of them. Number 3 is that, they expected their people to change just because they were told to do so. or they got caught up in their own reaction. Number 4, they underestimated the impact on their team. And number 5, and I'm sure everyone on the phone has seen this at some point, where they created an us versus them mentality, that I'm with you, employees, I disagree with this as well. Those leaders, they're not thinking about us, right? So these are common mistakes that our sponsors and managers or the frontline supervisors have made. The key thing that both groups have made is really around underestimating, right? Underestimating what that impact is going to be, misunderstanding the people side of change. Sometimes it's actually very positive. Maybe we overestimated our team's ability to handle the change, and it really has long-standing ripple effects, right? So I think one of the key things really, as we think about how do you avoid these types of mistakes, I think it's really around threefold areas. If you go to the next slide. The first is to focus on kind of a point in time becoming a better situation specific change leader. And we talked about this 2 weeks ago in our presentation on change leadership. If you were not able to participate, send Vanessa an email or send me an email and we'll make sure you get a link to that. But there were very specific actions and tangible kinds of things to think about with regard to being a better situation specific change leader, right? Communicating, championing, coaching through the change. The second is really around focusing on developing transformational leadership skills, thinking in terms of what are the behaviors that really, I guess, are at the core of being a transformational leader. And we're going to talk through a couple of those. And number 3 is really thinking about increasing your self-awareness about your own personal learning agility, because that really sits at the intersection and the crux of it. And we're going to spend the remainder of our time talking about what is transformational leadership, and Chad's going to talk us through Scitrain's innovative model around learning agility. So let's talk about what transformational leadership is. It's a theory of leadership where a leader is working with their team to figure out what needs to change, why it needs to change, creating that vision to guide the change through inspiration, and kind of executing that change in tandem with the team members. It's about developing behaviors. It's about helping people to, I guess, go beyond what they think that they're even capable of, right? Inspiring them to perform beyond their perceived capabilities. And so there was a really great research. I know it's a little dated, but I still think it's really relevant, by Caldwell. Caldwell back in 2003 pulled together a number of experts to review the core attributes of change leaders and managers, and they call it a Delphi study, which is basically where you bring together recognized experts in a specific field, and you get them in a room. They kind of will review something individually, independently, and then they come together through multiple working sessions to kind of align and norm on a specific topic. And so Caldwell facilitated a Delphi study on change leaders and managers, and they took a look at a number of job postings in the United Kingdom over a 6-month time period, and kind of looked at them individually, and then came back and they ranked and stacked the attributes of change leaders versus change managers on what they thought were the most important characteristics that a change leader, a transformational leader, would bring to the table versus a change manager, right? Like your supervisors, your frontline managers who are going to be helping to drive new ways of working. And so this just kind of outlines what that Delphi study came up with. What really jumped out at me is that there was some overlap between the two. There were 3 areas of overlap around learning from others, being open to new ideas, and being adaptable and flexible. And really, these are core components of transformational leadership and learning agility. And something that, if I had to one takeaway, it's really during times of transformation, if we focus in on these three things. I want to learn from others. There's a lot of humility in learning from others, challenging the status quo, being open to new ideas. It's more about a growth mindset, and being adaptable and flexible. It's all about being agile. And there was a study that was done, oh goodness, if you go to the next slide, in 2008, around this positive correlation between transformational leadership and commitment to change. It was really, and we have in the deck, we have all the resources, all the references to these articles and the books that we're referencing. So if you want to go read it at your leisure, you are more than welcome to do so. But the bottom line is Harold, Fedor, Caldwell, and Liu, they did a comparison of change commitment to change in an organization using Kotter's 8-stage change leadership model and transformational leadership, and focusing on the 4 I's of transformational leadership. And so Kotter's model starts with, a foundation of creating a sense of urgency, forming a coalition, creating a vision, communicating that vision, empowering action, creating quick wins, building on the change, and making it stick, right? So it's more a linear kind of process, and it is time bound for a specific change. That compared to transformational leadership, which was really focused on idealized influence, which is role modeling, inspirational motivation, which is about being a visionary, individualized consideration, which is around coaching an individual, and intellectual stimulation, which is around challenging the status quo. And so in this study, what they did a comparison of which of these models had a greater correlation with commitment, employees verbalizing that they are committed to a change that's in front of them. And what they found is that when the impact of a change is low, right? So the personal impact to me, or the risk to me personally, was low, that if you just use a change leadership structure like Kotter or Connor, or ProSci probably would be appropriate as well, that type of focus alone will get the level of support you need to kind of make it through the change. But if the impact of that change or that transformation is high, if the risk is really high to me, then transformational leadership is what would get you through the curve, right? Even if somebody wasn't seen as a very good change leader, they were seen as somebody who was inspirational, or maybe they didn't do all of the right things, like, sending out the emails on time, but there was an element of trustworthiness, and that the individual was just really inspirational. That really gets you through the day. So my takeaway is you focus on developing both change leadership skills in context of a change, of a situation specific change, and transformational leadership as kind of a core leadership philosophy as you think about it through, the term of your career. So let's just talk a minute on what transformational leadership is, and then I'm going to turn it over to Chad to talk about what I think is really the crux of it all, which is around learning agility. So in transformational leadership, the 4 I's, I think in the past, many leaders have probably defaulted more to a transactional management style, right? That rewards and punishes behaviors. And that can get you so far, but even as we kind of are in more of a VUCA world, it's less and less effective. Transformational leadership, on the other hand, it has emerged kind of as a way to understand what is unique of a motivational leader. And it's really around a democratic style that focuses on motivating people, empowering people, and transforming the entire group kind of from within. Okay, so there are 4 key components. The first is idealized influence. So think of this in terms of, so they use 4 I's to make it easy for us to remember, but idealized influence is really about being a role model. And transformational leaders, when we think about this idealized influence, is about the energy and the focus that we need to move forward and to serve as a role model for the team, right? So it's walking the walk, it's talking the talk. It is all about establishing respect and trust. This is about being the type of leader that other people want to emulate. Somebody who internalizes like the ideals and the core values that really set the organization apart, right? So idealized influence is all about being a worthy, I guess, in my opinion, a worthy role model. The second area is around inspirational motivation. This is about being a visionary. Transformational leaders, they have to take the time to really understand where they are and where they're headed, right? And that's all about really understanding the strengths and the weaknesses of the entire organization so that we can help the company overcome obstacles and achieve what those goals are. Some of the tactics or the techniques that inspirational leaders use are things like communicating transparently, setting a clear vision, and maybe communicating a balanced scorecard, recognizing individual and group accomplishments. So this is really around being a visionary and helping people to latch on and embrace that vision. The third area is around individualized consideration. And this is an area that I'm not sure that all leaders do well with, that many managers are promoted to being managers because they are functionally expert, not necessarily good at people. If you can hit next, Vanessa. Thank you. Individualized consideration is really all about coaching. It's about being able to take what's in front of us and being able to swivel and see through the lens of the person who's receiving it, and being able to mentor and guide and personalize and humanize kind of those interactions. It's all about helping employees to support each other and to share ideas, right? It's around really making it, I'm an individual, I'm not just a number, or I'm not a cog in the wheel. The fourth area is around intellectual stimulation. I think of this as status quo breakers. Sometimes you'll hear people, some people are just natural change catalysts. And this is really around leaders empowering and encouraging those individuals on their teams to innovate and to bring forward new ideas and to take risks, and to take a risk that isn't successful, to fail forward and to quickly realize that's not going to work and to get rid of it and to try something new. The entire focus is around being open and collaborative. This is around being creative and really encouraging and shaking things up. Not just doing it just because there's nothing better to do, but because we know that if you start to become a status quo organization, you will stagnate. And if we stagnate, then we can become obsolete. So this is really around creating competitive advantage for organizations. Right. At the center of this all really is learning agility. And learning agility, in my opinion, is about taking what I've learned in one context and being able to use that in a completely different context that I've never been in before, and to make better decisions because of it, right? That we are really around growing and persevering and reading people's emotions and thinking outside of the box. And really, I think having Chad talk through Scitrain's cutting edge learning agility approach, they've used it with multiple clients. It is rooted in sound academic-based research, having leveraged a behavioral scientist from Kent State University, both Chad and my alma mater, and they really have some very, very sound reliability and validity as they continue to use this model as they move forward. And so my hope is that you will take something away from Chad's explanation of learning agility. So Chad, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Shannon. Maybe we could leave it on that screen for just a minute. I really love that visual that you had up. Yeah, thanks for talking about transformational leadership. Actually, it's a very powerful form of leadership. Do you mind going back one slide? Yeah, just this one. And I would have to argue it's actually when it's done right and when you really work through these 4 I's, it's probably the most powerful leadership style that I've seen. And I would agree that at the center of it is learning agility, right? So this idea, if it's to be, it's up to me, right? So learning agility is really the foundation of the transformational growth, right? It's been proven that it's really hard to develop others and lead others through these 4 I's until you first actually explore what's going on for you and to develop yourself as well. And so that's what we're going to talk about. This learning agility is really a step underneath. It's really a foundation, but maybe just next slide, we could, this is very much a passion for me. At Scitrain, we started around to the turn of the century, sounds a little old by now, but around 18 years ago, it got kicked off. And we noticed that things were changing in the world, right? There was this old paradigm that, you have competence and experience, you learn that, right? And then there's this performance piece, current performance, and then future performance. And people should get jobs based on this experience and this performance. And then actually something happened. It's called VUCA. It's this volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous world that we live in. And it disrupts everything because there's all these peaks and valleys about, oh my goodness, like I thought that I was really good at this one piece as part of my job. And suddenly I feel like as I look into my internal toolbox, I don't have anything there. I can't really do anything with it. So, in the past, bosses were actually like put in place and they're supposed to have all the answers. And what we've seen from a global perspective, even the days of like, I'm the man or I'm the woman, I have all the answers lined up behind me, those days are really gone at this point, right? So why is learning agility so important, actually, as we look at this next line down, right? It's not always that, you just have the skill and then you move on with it. So if you click a couple more times, you see this like switch of learning going more for potential, right? And what do we mean by learning agility? We'll share that in a moment. But if you've ever found yourself in a situation where you shared a direction, for example, but it's just not followed, it's just not listened to, right? So what's going on? I'm the leader, like I'm supposed to be the one in charge. And so the way we were raised was quite different than what's going on even now in the world around us, right? And if you think it's not actually our problem, I'm sorry, I just got a message. Okay, it's not actually something that we ever worked on before. For example, it used to be that the boss had to have the answers prior to the internet in the digital revolution, even, right? Because even when you look at like BMW and actually, them putting a plant in the United States in the 80s, they had to follow a very intense project plan or things didn't get done. But then what happened with the internet? Suddenly people who are half my age are coming up with the answers quicker than I can get them. But that's not always the way that we think that is the best way, right? And so to have this learning agility, actually, we have found it can really help navigate this whitewater for you. If we go on further to the next slide, I would like to introduce this idea to you. It is, as Shannon said, it's based on the most cutting edge research because this is phenomenal research. And as we looked at how does one measure their own learning agility, there wasn't a lot out there. There wasn't a lot that we could go from. And so things that we found to be key in this research and being able to understand how is my learning agility, and is based here in these 4 rectangles. We're going to go into each one real quick and take a deep dive into the first one, which is growth mindset. And so there's 2 parts to growth mindset, actually. We've been taught a lot from the past that you cannot change, right? Like that you are who you are. And, there's not much you can do about that. Well, Carol Dweck from Stanford, founder of this concept, came out with something different and basically said, that's not exactly true, right? So the first side of the theory is called, like she calls out fixed mindset, right? Where personality is static. So people who avoid challenges and failure and actually plateau at an early level. So let's say, for example, you avoid a challenge of doing something like pitching a new idea to your company, coming up with a new idea because of a fear of failure, for example. That's something she called out as a fixed mindset and could prevent you from reaching your full potential. But let's switch over to the other side, which, we found that as living beings on this earth, right, we're not the strongest, we're not the fastest, but what we have learned and what the research has shown is that we can learn. It's really interesting as she explored the growth mindset idea. She actually found that, she took a group of school age kids and gave them very, very difficult, challenging situations, and found that when they pushed through, and the people who didn't quit, right, the people who persevered, there was actually neurons connecting in their brain and making them smarter as they were put outside of their comfort zone. And this was very powerful. So the people who were more curious, sought out opportunities to learn and grow through their lifetime. A personal example for me, this one is a little bit, it hit me at an early age. I was a musician back in school, and there was somebody who played the piano, and we used to kind of have a rival on who was better at percussion stuff and so some other types of instruments. And he informed me that I was never smart enough to play the piano. It would never happen, actually, for you. And actually, I believed him that was true because I saw people play the piano and they started at an early age. But I am happy to say that while this has bothered me throughout my life at various times, about a year and a half ago, I started learning to play the piano. And now I think I'm driving my family crazy with different types of songs. I've got a classic songbook I'm playing. I'm trying to get them to sing along, but it's not always working. And I just, maybe to protect my marriage, I should stop trying so hard to get them to come along. But anyway, this is the first quadrant. It's actually a growth mindset, okay? Extremely important to know your growth mindset, and it's part of the questionnaire that you can do online if you want. But let's move forward to the next part, which I actually covered this already. It's fine. Is grit, right? So you may have heard this concept from Angela Duckworth around grit, very closely even aligned to sort of idealized influence or individualized consideration as well. A lot of these are really at the root of the 4 I's. But actually, this idea of giftedness is something that even in school is not exactly the best thing for kids. And actually, when you reward giftedness, it's actually the wrong way to go. And it's been proven through her research that even these gifted programs in school, aren't the best solution, but more rewarding people on doing the work, right? So when they study and the kids are doing their work and they start to study, you reward that behavior. Now, even if they come back with a C, it could have been an F, right? They come up with a C, you reward the work. And what she proved is she had proven that it had gotten better. And you may know some popular examples of like Thomas Edison being told that he was too stupid to do anything important, right? He was a dreamer, and he was a smart guy, But if he would have held on to that, like I held on to the piano thing, we may not have had some of the inventions we had. But let's go down to the next box, which is, it's really about passion and perseverance to get to your long-term goal, right? So it's not just resilience. It's like day in, day out. Can you see your long-term goal, and can you get traction even if you slip a bit, right? And you know what your long-term goal is. And this is an important measure to know about yourself. Some of you may know the work Malcolm Gladwell did about the 10,000 hour rule. And I don't want to, kind of repeat something that maybe everybody already knows, this idea when you put 10,000 hours in, you're going to be really good at something. I had a coach actually back in school who would challenge that a bit, and Angela Duckworth did as well. It's not just about putting 10,000 hours in, as Gladwell said, but good hours. So my coach used to say it's not about like practice, but it's perfect practice. So how does one truly become an expert? And when you put this energy in and you go after it day in, day out, she has multiple, you have to read some of her work, great success around what she's proven to be true. And it's certainly had to be part of learning agility, because you have to know this about yourself. We have found that as well. So just moving on then. So it is about drive, passion, and resilience, right? So are you intrinsically driven? And is it important enough to you? Now, actually, if you decide that it's not, that's okay. It's about understanding the truth as quick as you can. But how does one keep moving and really understand what are your drivers? And this is actually spelled out for you in this questionnaire too. So we can move on to the third, which is around emotional agility as well. So really understanding your own emotions. Now, one of the things that Shannan said earlier is, when the impact is high, you need transformational leadership. But the other thing she said is the most misunderstood is the people side of change, which is the individualized consideration. Now, we do work in 5 continents, 10 languages, from Asia, Middle East, Europe, Latin America, North America. This is something that I see cuts through all boundaries, basically, is that people do not spend enough time really understanding their interpersonal engagements, which is around individual consideration even, right? The use of their interpersonal skills to truly take a time out, understand where people are. When you think about your own teams, do you truly know what energizes them, where they're at, and how to manage emotions in yourself, right? Leveraging your own emotions to understand and how to act is really important, right? So this kind of gets it even into Daniel Goleman's work, where he talked about emotional intelligence in 2 ways, right? In one way, can you understand something's wrong with somebody? You see them and you're like, that's not okay. He seems to be upset. Okay, that's half the battle. The other half is, I actually have a tool in my toolbox that I know what to do to help him or her. And that's an important component that I see is the most often, and it will crash a project like crazy. You think you've got good traction, but you're not truly listening actively and really getting engaged. And then managing the emotions in others, understanding, reacting is extremely important. So this one is, sometimes we overlook this because it's like, oh, it's the emotion part. No, I mean, actually, when you listen actively and you really understand your own emotional agility and what your shortcomings are, and you come up with some tools that will work for you, I mean, this is completely invaluable. So then the fourth part as well, right? We'll move to intellectual agility. This is not about your GPA score. This isn't about intellectual or some kind of IQ score, which is like between 45 and 145, and then, or like, anything like that. This is even about how fast you can process, right? Thinking critically, effectively analyzing information, even understanding when is 80% good enough, even on a project, when do I know when to pull the plug? I was working with a life sciences business that was working on a drug, and the drug actually, a lot of drugs take 10 years to create. And I had found as I started working with them that some people realized that they should have pulled the plug on the project 2 years ago, right? But they're over analyzing and their processing isn't maybe sometimes as quick as it can be. And then you waste a lot of time, energy, emotion, and ultimately money when you don't act quickly. So how quick can you process, and there's there are some fears that can prevent us from going there, right? The fear of being wrong, and being challenged. So ability to, really quickly identify and take in key information and move on it, even if I'm wrong, because then what do? I learn from it, right? Flexibly processing and switching, combining perspectives is sometimes is arguably more important than traditional IQ as well. So yeah, effectively and efficiently assimilating and evaluating characterization of information into your mental models and be able to learn from that. And actually it gets easier as you move forward, right? So just moving on. So just reflecting for a minute, like, what about you? Like, we talked about, the 4 I's, idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. You can't develop others and be the full leader that you want to be until you dig in and really understand some of this about your own learning agility, right? And so this is, it's proven that you actually can move the needle on these 4 areas, but you do need to understand them, level set, and then make a project plan and say, this is what I'm going to do. Einstein says intelligence starts with feedback, right? You get feedback from somebody and they will be honest with you. I gotta be honest, I did make a mistake because I picked the wrong feedback partner because you got to pick a feedback partner who will give you solid advice, So I was telling my mother some feedback that I had received about how I was I wasn't listening to people always, and I was a little bit too bitey sometimes. And my mom was the wrong feedback partner. She was like, who are they? What's their name? I need names because I'm going to contact them. I said, Mom, that's not what I'm going for here. I'm saying I need some feedback. Have you ever seen this for me in your personal life? And anyway, just kind of cracked me up. So you got to pick the best partner. Oh, Lisa says that the audio is breaking up. So I hope you can still hear okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. So anyway, pick the right feedback partner. That's where it starts once you understand your baseline. And then the next piece here, just one more click, if you would, for me. How can we develop the learning agility? It is that grit, it's about that perseverance, and it is proven that as a base, if you want to move on this, you can learn it and you'll be able to maximize this in your life as well. And Shannan, I don't know if you have any ads, or any thoughts around this as well, but they really combine nicely together. Actually.
Yeah, I would agree. Vanessa, if you could take us to the last chart. So I think if you guys have any questions for Chad or I, we are happy to answer those questions. I think the key takeaways really is, lead from where you are. Remember, it's an action, it's an activity, it's not a title. you can avoid the mistakes that other leaders and managers have made, right? And the key way to do that is by increasing your awareness and being deliberate in how you develop your situation specific change leadership, your transformation leadership skills, and your learning agility. And remember, learning agility starts with self-awareness, honest self-awareness. Chad, I like how you said, make sure you get the right feedback partner. I think your mother and my mother, maybe they're sisters because my mom's the same way. But be more observant of your reactions to situations, and you can use that information in new and unfamiliar situations. So if we could go to the last.
Hey, Shannon,
yeah,
I have to tell you, I got that message from Lisa, who's one of the viewers, who said that it was breaking up. And I thought she was telling me she was breaking up. So I thought I was really telling this funny thing. Here it was the audio breaking up. So I guess I can't really pat myself on the back, but it did crack me up when my mom did that. So
yes. So I'm just going to pause here, and Vanessa, just find out if we have any questions that have come in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shannon and Chad. We did have one question come in. This person would like to know, how can I distinguish between constructive feedback, or at least with good intention, how to handle those that don't have a good intention with their feedback?
Oh, well, so I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday where they couched the feedback in terms of constructive. Now, fortunately, it wasn't like directed at me. It was more in general. And really what it really was is they just wanted to complain. And so as I listened, using my emotional agility and my my EQ, listening for a little bit, and then I swiveled. I think I gave it a 5 minute of complaining, and then I swiveled and asked the question for solutions. And I think sometimes if folks are giving us, put in quotes, constructive feedback, if we ask in humility, what are their recommendations or what are their ideas, if they have something that is tangible, right, then maybe it was truly authentic. If there isn't a tangible solution, sometimes maybe it was just their way of complaining or poking us in the eye. So I listen, acknowledge, and ask for ideas and solutions.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. And maybe just something we've seen that also is quite international and seems to cut through all of that kind of crap. By the way, there's this book called The No Asshole Rule. And it's written by a Harvard professor, but it's really well done talking about exactly this problem.
Yep.
But actually, feedback should always be balanced, right? So there should be a strength, and there should be something that you could do better, but it should also be based on concrete example, something they've seen or heard, right? And that they share with you the quote, right? So if they say, hey, Chad, you're coming across as arrogant to me, then there's a behavior they've witnessed underneath that, or a concrete example that led them to that word of arrogance. And you have the right to ask them, like, okay, you're saying, or it could be friendly. Chad, you're coming across as friendly. And then I said, but what behavior have you seen? Well, right when I walked in the room, you met my eye, you walked across the room, welcomed me, and shook my hand. And to me, I would call that friendly because you've shown this, right? And the last piece too, going with what Shannon was saying as well, just it has to matter to you, right? So it's interesting, like when you look at the feedback and you hold it up in front of you and say, I hear that this person is telling me that I'm not good at golf or my swing stinks, but do I care? Is it in my goals? Do I even want to get better at that? Or are they just being a jerk? I don't know. So anyway, just piggybacking on what Shannon shared.
Hopefully that's helpful.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions come in, Vanessa?
It looks like that was our last question. So
Okay.
want to encourage everyone, if you do have more questions or want to learn more, please reach out to Shannon and Chad. Both of their emails are up on the screen. I don't know if either of you have anything else to add before we close out for the day.
I have one thing to share with folks that are on the line. As I mentioned, Scitrain's approach to learning agility, it is questionnaire based. It is rooted in research. It is similar to taking like a personality assessment, and there's a report that helps you just kind of understand where you are on the continuum for the 4 components of learning agility. I know Chad and I talked about, for anyone who is interested to kind of take the Scitrain learning agility questionnaire, please reach out to him. I know that they're working on some special pricing for folks who are participating in these webinars, as opposed to kind of how they do it for a corporation. So if you're interested in that, be sure to reach out to Chad, and I highly recommend it. It is eye-opening, and I think the thing that's most encouraging to me is that it's not static. It is not the end all be all. If you're low in grit, it's learnable. If you're low in growth mindset, it is learnable. These are things that are learnable. It is not a static kind of situation. So Chad, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for joining Avaap in this series over the last month. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for everybody viewing. Feel
Yes.
free to email if you're interested.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Vanessa, I think we're good to go. Everybody have a good day.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.